1420 WBSM presents Southcoast with your hosts Tim Weisberg and Matt Costa.
Good evening and welcome to Spooky Southcoast. Tim Weisberg here, along with science advisor Matt Moniz. The silent assassin Matt Costa is out and about, still on his big trip. Have you been following along with his big trip on Facebook?
Yeah, I have.
It's fascinating, the places that he's seeing. I wish I could be there with him. Although I'm glad I'm not, because there's two people in that cab of that truck, so it'd be really crazy. But I wish them luck. I hope things are going well. It seems like they are.
Looks like they're having a lot of fun.
And that's what's important. He needs the break, because he's been here plugging away behind the boards for the last, how long have we been on now? 6+ years? And he's been here for pretty much every one of those episodes. So we're glad that he's out there and enjoying a good time. We had a good time here last week with our special guests.
It was interesting, yeah.
And it's taken off like wildfire. I'm going to submit the clip of my son saying the word penis on the air to America's Funniest Home Videos. So who knows? You know, at the very least, maybe it'll get us a little bit of publicity for Spooky Southcoast on America's Funniest Home Videos. Anybody that watches our show via Spooky TV on SpookySouthcoast.com or checks out the video, I guess you'd call it video archive, video podcast, whatever you call it, on YouTube, you know that this is one of America's Funniest Home Videos each and every week. But not enough to win any kind of $10,000 prize. That's you know, if it did, that might be enough money to upgrade Spooky TV. I was personally hoping that we would win Mega Millions yesterday, just so that, you know, we could buy some better cameras for Spooky TV. That was the only thought that I had. If I won $640 million, I think I can go out and maybe I can buy that $120 one instead of just the $20. That's all I thought.
Sure.
I thought about how I could best help the world of the paranormal with some of that money, which is, you know, what we talk about here on Spooky Southcoast. So my first thought was, of course, that I could buy the Amityville house, which is something that I've always wanted to do. Even though the new owners recently just bought it, we know that you're just screwing up all the audio. So we needed to win Mega Millions just so we could buy a new patch cord. So we could have better audio on Spooky TV. You know, I've always wanted to buy the Amityville house and open that up to paranormal investigators. But one of the other properties that I've always wanted to buy was Maplecroft, which is the second home in Visitor. We talk a lot about the home of Andrew Borden, where the murders took place, but Maplecroft, of course, is where Lizzie moved later on in life, and we would love to get the chance to get into that place. The owner's not really keen for the paranormal investigator, which I'm surprised, because everything that I've heard about him, he wouldn't pass up. But in this case, he is. So we'll talk a little bit about that coming up later on with our guests tonight, Michael Martins and Dennis A. Binette of the Fall River Historical Society. They are the co-authors of the new book, Parallel Lives, a social history of Lizzie A. Borden and her Fall River. And I'm going to attempt to hold the book up to the cameras on Spooky TV, but I might have to call in a couple guys to help me with it. This thing is massive. I'll pull it up to the Tim cam here on Spooky TV, but this thing is quite a volume, and it's extremely impressive, the amount of work that went into this. It's 8+ years of work between Michael and Dennis putting this together, but also the work to lay it all out, to edit it, to index it, to design this outstanding jacket for it, and just to pick it up and hold it is an outstanding effort as well. But this is a complete picture of what Fall River was like at the time of the Borden murders, and hopefully a more complete picture of Lizzie Borden herself, unlike any that we've ever heard before. I mean, we like to talk about what we think the Lizzie story is, but when we talk about it, we're looking at through the tunnel vision of a supposed murderess. So we're not really getting an accurate depiction of who Lizzie Borden might have been. We're getting an accurate depiction of who we think might have been the person that committed the crimes. And it's very important that those might be two different people. What'd you do now? You screwed it all up?
Hopefully no.
Well, we'll fix it at the break.
Yeah.
But
We just won't be able to switch cameras.
no. So I'll just open up Minicam again. Would you just close it out?
Yeah.
Yeah, just open it up again. It should work. So we'll talk about the real Lizzie Borden coming up in a little while with Michael and Dennis. And if you haven't picked up the book, you can get it from the website, LizzieBordenParallelLives.com, and from the Fall River Historical Society's website, LizzieBorden.org. But trust me, if you want to pick up the book and you're local, you want to just go to the Fall River Historical Society and buy it because you don't want to pay the shipping charges on this bad boy. And plus, if you're there and Dennis and Michael are there, they can sign it for you. And it's really, it's you can read in it the passion that they have for telling the complete story. And you can tell how, right early on, you can tell how a lot of what we think about Lizzie is going to be kind of thrown out the window. And so that's what I'm excited to talk to them about, the real Lizzie Borden tonight. Because if you want to say that the paranormal is such a huge part of the Lizzie Borden legend, then it's important to understand who you're talking about when you're trying to talk about Lizzie Borden, the ghost. And I think that we've gone in there making way too many assumptions over the years, and so many strange and competing theories have developed as a result of the work of past quote-unquote historians who have written their own books. I'm thinking of Victoria Lincoln, who came up with some theories that kind of became accepted part of the Lizzie culture without any real proof.
Right.
And looking at the work of the more modern day investigators into the case who are coming at it from a paranormal bent, a lot of them, and they're bringing in a lot of the, I don't want to say preconceived notions, but the conceived notions of what we think might have been the reasons why the murders happened, why it's left its mark on the location. And, of course, you also have the psychic point of view and the Frank's box point of view, where you're getting information from these methods that is adding to that Lizzie legend. And I'm talking, of course, in this regard, to the incest stories. But there has been some credence in the past for those stories through communications. Of course, we've talked to Faye Musselman in the past who had communications and said that there may have been some allusions to that in some of the letters amongst the people that knew Lizzie Borden.
Yeah.
So, we'll get into all this and more coming up a little bit later with Dennis and Michael. We do want to remind everybody that coming up on April 21st is our graveyard shift at Slater Mill at the Slater Mill Museum in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. Tickets are $99, and you get the chance to investigate all night long one of the most haunted locations in Rhode Island and the oldest mill in America. When the good thing about this is you're getting not only to hang out with the spooky crew, of course, myself, Matt Moniz, Andrew Lake will be there, but also Jeff Belanger, of course, who is heavily involved with everything with Legend Trips, but also Keith and Carl Johnson, who are two of the experts of the paranormal goings-on at Slater Mill. So they'll be there to give a presentation and to help lead the investigation as well. So I'm excited about this. We're going to have coming up in a few weeks Riley and Stephen Black of Black Cross Paranormal, and they've been conducting some ongoing investigations into Slater Mill, kind of like what we do with Lizzie Borden, where they're keeping tabs on it and they're using it almost as a training ground for new investigators too, because they've been able to make a connection with the phenomena there. So they're going to come on the show coming up in a couple of weeks, and they're going to play some of the best clips that they've caught there. They've also, I know they've investigated there with Carl Johnson, and I think Carl's going to try to join us that night as well. And they've investigated with Joe Chin from Ghost Hunters. So we're going to try and give Joe a call too, see if he can call in and give us his thoughts on Slater Mill as well. So it's a fascinating place, and it's definitely going to be a fun event. Graveyard Shift at Slater Mill, April 21st. Tickets are $99, and you can purchase them by going to legendtrips.com or by going to spookysouthcoast.com as well. So, I mean, I'm looking forward to having the chance to go there, but of course, nothing compares to the Lizzie Borden house when it comes to investigating the paranormal. So we'll have some announcements coming up about another Legend Trip there a little bit later on this year. All right, so before we get into the discussion with Michael and Dennis tonight, Moniz, what do you say we get a little bit weird?
Go for it.
Although, if you're like Moniz, you're a little bit weird all the time.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, then, you don't need a segment on a radio show to be your excuse for it. But nonetheless, let's do it.
More bad news.
Well, I got a great show for you today with some wonderful weird stuff. I feel so very weird.
The Week in Weird. All right, our first story comes from our friends over in the UK, and it doesn't get any weirder than in the UK. They always seem to have the best weird stories. A politician in the UK stunned his town council colleagues by claiming that his real mother is a 9-foot green alien with 8 fingers. Councillor Simon Parks, who was elected to represent Stakesby Ward and Whitby Town Council last month, said although he has had hundreds of close encounters with extraterrestrials, it will not interfere with his mission to help residents at the seaside resort. Speaking on YouTube, Councillor Parks said he first saw an alien at the age of 8 months, when a traditional kite-shaped face with huge eyes, tiny nostrils, and a thin mouth appeared over his cot. He said 2 green stick things came in. I was aware of some movement over my head. I thought, those aren't Mummy's hands. Mummy's hands are pink. And even though he's British, he means his own mummy, not the mummy. It says, I am your real mother. I am your more important mother. And he said after he contracted chicken pox at the age of 3, his mother went to work and left him at home to fend for himself. I think that means his Earth mother. Went to work and left home to defend for himself while an 8-foot doctor, dressed as a waiter, appeared to offer help. As an 11-year-old, he claims he was taken aboard on a craft by his alien mother and made to deal with the beings on board. He said the reason extraterrestrials are interested in me is not because of my physical body, but because of what is inside of me, my soul. So he did say that his extraterrestrial beliefs did not come up on the doorstep while he was campaigning recently, and he says that it will not make any difference in how he performs his job. So I like how he does wait until after the election to announce that his real mother is an alien. Moniz, I know that you think that there's many politicians who are the progeny of aliens in this country.
There are some that I suspect may be directly aliens themselves.
And we're not talking about the reptilian agenda, the David Icke stuff. We're talking about, just your own political beliefs here.
Well, yeah, but that's a whole nother show.
All right, well, we'll move on from there. In Spartanburg, South Carolina.
I'm in almost every school bus and classroom. I go to school.
You think I would learn to shut those commercials off by now? Spartanburg, South Carolina. Police are searching for the vandals who opened a grave at a Spartanburg, South Carolina cemetery and stole a skull. Police believe someone opened the grave at Oakwood Cemetery and took the skull on Monday. The grave site was still in disarray on Wednesday. The headstone and cinder blocks were strewn around the area. The casket was partially exposed, and it was apparent that someone deliberately chipped away at the cement seal over it. The lid of the casket was also askew. There are graves dating back to the 1800s in Oakwood Cemetery, but the grave that was desecrated on Monday is from the 1960s. The cemetery is infamous in the paranormal community. It is often referred to as Hell's Gate Cemetery or simply as Hell's Gates. The origin of the name is not clear, but it appears in many references to the cemetery. People have reported seeing unexplained mists and apparitions, hearing voices, and having problems with electronic devices while in the cemetery, and paranormal investigators list Hell's Gate on many internet sites as a place of unexplained activity. The South Carolina Paranormal Investigations website has a warning about the cemetery that says, do not, and I repeat, do not, go here alone or at dark. There have been several encounters with very hostile Satanists. So, of course, we here at Spooky South Coast
How many pacifist Satanists do you know?
That's true. Well, I mean, there's some. I know of a few. But that's more because they're lazy.
Oh, okay.
They're not quite fully committed to the cause. But, we here at Spooky South Coast do not condone any desecration of any graves. And I think that we're going to end up seeing some bad news as a result of this, because people are going to tie in this grave desecration with the fact that it is popular with the paranormal community. Even though the paranormal community is saying, well, there are Satanists involved, and it seems more likely to me that if there are Satanists, and I mean fringe wannabe Satanists probably more than the real deal,
Right.
then I could understand them as being the ones who would desecrate the grave. I can't imagine any paranormal investigators would do that. But unfortunately, the paranormal community will take the hit from that. Pack your bags, Moniz. You speak French?
Yeah.
Un peu? Okay. A mountain looming over a French commune with a population of just 200 is being touted as a modern-day Noah's Ark when doomsday arrives, supposedly less than 9 months from now. A rapidly increasing stream of New Age believers have descended in their camper vans to the usual picturesque and tranquil in the Pyrenees Mountains village of Poujarache. My French is a little rusty. They believe that when an apocalypse strikes on the 21st of December, the aliens waiting in their spacecraft inside the mountain will save all the humans nearby and beam them off to the next age. Well, of course. As the cataclysmic date nears, the goings-on around the peak have become more bizarre and ritualistic. For decades, there's been a belief that the mountain is the highest in the mountain range, and it possesses an eerie power. Often called the Upside-Down Mountain, geologists think that it exploded after its formation and the top landed the wrong way up. It's thought to have inspired Jules Verne's Journey to the Center of the Earth and Steven Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Since the 1960s, it's attracted New Agers who insist it emits special magnetic waves. Further, rumors persist that the country's late president, Francois Mitterrand, was transported by helicopter on the peak, while the Nazis and Israel's Mossad performed mysterious digs there. Now the nearby village is awash with New Agers who have boosted the local economy, though their naked group climbs up to the peak have raised concerns as well as eyebrows. Among other oddities, some hikers have been spotted scaling the mountain carrying a ball with a golden ring strung together by a single thread. So, there you go. Not only are they planning on getting picked up by the alien, race that'll save us on the 21st of December, but they're heading up there naked. Which, when I read that story, as soon as they said alien spaceship coming to pick them up, I thought Matt Moniz. But then when they were going up there naked, I was like, definitely Matt Moniz.
Not in a mountaintop in December.
No, in the Pyrenees Mountains?
Yeah.
Well, and here's the other thing, too. If it wasn't for the photos, and I'm not even sure that they're not doctored, I wouldn't really believe that Matt Costa is where that he says he is. I could definitely picture them being there at this mountain, waiting, not to get a ride from the aliens, but to laugh at everybody when they don't get picked up. That sounds like a Costa
That would be
kind of
Costa,
thing.
yeah.
All right, well, that does it for the Week in Weird this week. If you have any stories that you'd like to share with us, just send us an email, spookycrew@spookysouthcoast.com. We're always looking for things that are a little bit strange or off, or things that just, you think would be perfect for the show, which is things that are strange and odd. All right, why don't we take a break? When we come back, we will talk with Michael Martins and Dennis A. Binette of the Fall River Historical Society about their new book, Parallel Lives, a social history of Lizzie A. Borden and her Fall River, and it's a fascinating work. Check out their website. They have two websites, actually. It's lizzieborden.org as well as lizziebordenparallellives.com. Both are linked up on the front page at spookysouthcoast.com as well. So stay tuned. We'll be coming back in just a few minutes with more here on Spooky South Coast.
Sup. Technology. Oranges.
I have little trust in this government.
What's going on?
Now my message to Congress is, don't stop here. Don't
This
stop
administration
here.
is clearly out of ideas.
And what it means to you. AM 1420, WBSM.
Hey, when do you crave the refreshing taste of iced tea? Twisted Tea wants to know. After mowing the lawn, at a barbecue, on a really hot day, think about that same satisfying glass of iced tea, but with a kick. Twisted Tea is a hard iced tea that's made from beer, but tastes like real iced tea. And nothing satisfies like an ice-cold Twisted Tea. The next time you and your friends are looking for some refreshment, but you need a little kick, grab a Twisted Tea, the refreshing hard iced tea that tastes like real iced tea.
Twisted Tea Brewing Company, Cincinnati, Ohio. Drink responsibly.
The pictures are posted, and it's time to vote. The WBSM Converse Photo Supply Pet Idol Contest. At WBSM.com. Vote as often and as many times as you'd like. The listener who submitted the cutest pet wins a $200 gift card to Melissa's Pet Depot in Dartmouth. Check out all the photos and vote for your favorite at WBSM.com. Pet Idol is brought to you by Converse Photo Supply in New Bedford, Emma Jean's Cupcake Factory, Ice Cream Shop, and Candy House in Fairhaven, Melissa's Pet Depot in Dartmouth, and by Belltown, New England, with AM 1420 WBSM. AM 1420 WBSM and the Seaport Inn and Marina invite you to an incredible evening of psychic fun. On Friday the 13th, it's the ladies-only Psychic Party, hosted by John Stetson. Experience this lively and fascinating show, delivered by John Stetson, with his distinctive style of humor, intensity, and compassion. John Stetson is known worldwide and has performed for presidents, celebrities, and has appeared on CNN, CBS, NBC, and on the A&E Network. Tickets for the ladies-only Psychic Party, hosted by John Stetson, are limited and available now at the Seaport Inn and Marina in Fairhaven.
Hey, when do you crave the refreshing taste of iced tea? Twisted Tea wants to know. After mowing the lawn, at a barbecue, on a really hot day, think about that same satisfying glass of iced tea, but with a kick. Twisted Tea is a hard iced tea that's made from beer, but tastes like real iced tea. And nothing satisfies like an ice-cold Twisted Tea. The next time you and your friends are looking for some refreshment, but you need a little kick, grab a Twisted Tea, the refreshing hard iced tea that tastes like real iced tea.
Twisted Tea Brewing Company, Cincinnati, Ohio. Drink responsibly.
Spring training is speeding by, and the 2012 regular season begins soon for the Boston Red Sox. With so many changes during the offseason, what will this year bring? Hear every game and every play on AM 1420 WBSM. Red Sox Baseball. Presented by Southern Mass Credit Union, Ralph Auto Center, Vasco da Gama, Pharma Health, and by C&R Enterprises. The 2012 Red Sox. Hear every game all season long. Coming in April to AM 1420 WBSM.
All right, welcome back to Spooky South Coast. Tim Weisberg here, along with the science advisor Matt Moniz. By the time Costa gets back, I'll start getting it right. But we are here to talk about the paranormal usually, but tonight we're going to talk about the true history of Lizzie Borden and her Fall River with our guests Michael Martins and Dennis A. Binette of the Fall River Historical Society. They're also the authors of Parallel Lives, A Social History of Lizzie A. Borden and Her Fall River. They had a previous work, The Commonwealth of Massachusetts versus Lizzie A. Borden, the Knowlton Papers, 1892 to 1893, a volume of unpublished letters and documents from the files of prosecuting attorney Hosea M. Knowlton, and was unprecedented, being the first collection of primary source documents ever made available on that case. Both are recognized authorities on the Borden case and have appeared in numerous televised interviews and documentary films on the subject, and we're excited to finally get them here on Spooky South Coast after all these years. I think I just dropped Dennis. Oh. Let's see if we can get him on the air too. There we are. Yep, we lost him. Michael, are you with us?
I am. How are you, Tim?
We're doing fine, except for the fact that our producer's on vacation. So I'm handling everything.
Gotcha. So a one-man show.
Well, two-man, but Moniz is
two-man show.
Moniz is no help.
There you go.
Hopefully we can get Dennis to call back in on that line. But we will talk to you for a few minutes, Michael, while we're waiting for that. And the book, we talked about this a while ago. I remember we first started discussing it here on the show. This is something that's been in the works for a number of years.
Well, nearly a decade, actually. It was a long project that we started just about 9 years ago, and the book was actually published in late November of last year.
And when you started putting it all together originally, did you think that it would take a much shorter time period than that, or?
Well, you know, it's funny. We have a prototype of what we originally conceived, and it was considerably smaller than the finished work, which is, over 1,100 pages. Initially, we were aware of the fact that there was a great deal of material in private collections pertaining to Lizzie's life, but I don't think either Dennis or myself were fully aware of how much material was out there in private collections. And it was amazing, the material that people gave us access to. It was really an incredible journey.
And when you were, first laying out that outline, I'm sure that you knew that it would take quite a bit of space and quite a bit of prose to be able to tell the story of Lizzie Borden alone, but to incorporate all of Fall River at that time, you're taking what's essentially already a massive research project in one regard and then adding to it also the time period as well. I can imagine that probably threw a lot of extra work your way as well.
Well, it really did, but no one has ever looked at Lizzie's life in the past against the backdrop of the city in which she lived her life, and both Dennis and I felt that it was essential, and I think anyone that's really done any serious research on the case realizes that it is essential that you have a pretty thorough understanding of what Fall River was like during her lifetime in order to understand why things occurred in the manner that they did. And by that I mean you need to have a good sense of what Fall River was at the time. So we tried to tell the story of a woman's life against the backdrop of place and time, and I hope we were successful in doing that. I mean, the result was a massive volume, but there's a terrific amount of new material on Fall River and on Lizzie's life. It's really the first social history of Fall River, but as Dennis said at one point, it kind of really constitutes the first biography of Lizzie Borden as well. So I think it was an amazing project, and was really considerably more extensive, I think, than either one of us realized.
There's one thing that we found out that was very interesting in the research, and once we started to pull the stories together, is that Fall River, even though it was a major industrial city, was also in many ways a very small town. And as we unfolded a lot of the stories that were not the Lizzie Borden stories, a lot of the same characters kept reappearing. And, the web got smaller and smaller, and all of a sudden, familiar names and personalities are starting to creep up all over the place. And it's easy to see why a story like that affected so many people in so many ways.
Well, Dennis, Michael mentioned your quote about it being the first true biography of Lizzie Borden, and it's the first one that goes into it without any kind of agenda, it seems. It seems like most of the other books that have been published that try to give a window into Lizzie's life are putting forth some theory as to why the murders happened. And did you have discussions amongst yourselves from the beginning that you were trying to portray her as objectively as possible?
Well, I think we were pretty much in agreement from the very start that the intention was not to write a whodunit, or she done it or she didn't do it, but rather to write the story of a city and a woman. And of course, you can't tell that without talking about the murders in the trial, but in the 1,000 pages, I think you'll find that probably about 35 to 40 pages are about the murder in the trial. The rest of it is all about her and the city around her.
And the important thing about, going into this with that idea is you have to kind of wash away everything else that everybody's ever written. I mean, you want to take some of it, but when it comes to the theories about who she was, you can't rely on a lot of that stuff.
Well, fortunately, we had access to a tremendous amount of unpublished material. So really, for the first time, Lizzie Borden speaks in her own words. And by that I mean we've published over 40 new letters or cards or notes in her hand. So you have a much truer sense of who she was as a person because we've now found her voice. So because of that, it gives you a greater picture of who she was as a person, and it gives you a better sense of her thoughts and her fears and her emotions. And, it's interesting. I think some of the most significant letters that were uncovered were letters that she sent to a very close friend that she wrote from her prison cell. So these are letters that she wrote from the Taunton jail. And, at the time, the newspapers portrayed her as this cold, stoic sort of individual who showed absolutely no emotion. You have to remember that these Yankee girls would have been brought up in such a way that they were taught and trained. I mean, it's not, emotion was not something that you displayed publicly. I mean, that just simply wasn't done. But when you read the letters that were never intended to be published, a completely different character emerges, a woman capable of great emotion, a woman who was on trial for her life and knew it. So fortunately, we did have access to a terrific amount of material, but really we did have to sort of sort through a lot of, other books and decide, what we could use and what we couldn't. And the intent was to tell her story, a great portion of it in her own words and the words of others, contemporaries, of course, who knew her. So we were able to, I think, portray her as a much more factual character than has appeared in some other writings in the past.
Well, sorry, go ahead. No, go right ahead, Dennis.
No, just to add on to that, the thing that we did find in the research is that, as you said, the person that is presented to us that we had to start working with was a person that was not really an actual person, but a person that was manufactured. She was manufactured by public opinion, by rumor, gossip, by the press. And the more we researched and the more we uncovered this material that was in her own hand, talking, from her heart, it was totally opposed to the Lizzie Borden that has stood as the legend, quote unquote.
Exactly. The Lizzie Borden that descended through legend was not the person. So pretty much everything that we, quote unquote, knew about Lizzie Borden, the majority of that information was not factual because it was based on supposition and legend and outright lies.
Mm-hmm.
So a different character emerges.
And you talked about the, the women of the era and how they would have dealt with a situation like Lizzie went through, and that's important because in this book you put Lizzie in the context of her times, of her city, and of her culture, which is something that too often we're looking at this case with too much of a 20th or a 21st century bent.
Exactly. And then that was the intent from the beginning, and really I think that's one of the reasons it ended up being such a massive work, because there were so many different aspects of life at that period that we had to sort of delve into. And it's a simple concept to tell a person's story against the backdrop of the city in which they lived their life. But amazingly, with Lizzie, it had never been done, which is sort of surprising.
We do feel like we've kind of created a folklore, a mythological version of Lizzie Borden. And I think that people who are on the periphery of the Lizzie Borden story, especially I'm talking about paranormal investigators who have a rudimentary knowledge of the history of it, we've created somebody who is almost like an American folk hero to some degree. Mm-hmm. And I know that there's been, women's lib people who have championed her as, coming out of the kitchen holding an axe and blazing the trail. And there's all these different ways that she's been looked at. Is it strange now that you have a complete idea of who the person was to see so many different aspects of society latch on to different aspects of Lizzie Borden?
Well, I think people have latched on it because you can take so much away from her story and from the case. But in actuality, I don't think she was anything of a trailblazer at all. She was very much a woman of her time and a woman who tried to lead the semblance of a normal life against pretty incredible circumstances. No one knows if Lizzie Borden was innocent or guilty. No one will ever know that. I mean, that's a question that's never, a mystery that will never be solved. But you have to wonder what her life was like after having been accused of such a heinous crime and tried and acquitted. She lived the greater portion of her life under the specter of suspicion, and it could not have been an easy thing.
And unfortunately, living under that type of a microscope has also done some damage to her character over the years, because everything that she's done since has been viewed under through the lens of an accused murderer.
Oh, of course, Tim. I mean, that character has been completely created. The character that has descended through history is completely fictitious. So many of the things that were accepted facts about Lizzie's life were very simple to dispel because there's absolutely no evidence to document any of them. Mm-hmm. Yet you can document the exact opposite.
And she was in one of those positions, too, where you're kind of, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. If she decided to not interact with people, then they're like, well, she was guilty. Look at how she won't interact with anybody. And then if she did, they're like, oh, she's guilty. She's trying to make up for it.
Exactly.
Well, the whole question about her staying in Fall River, I mean, that's exactly the case. It's if she had stayed in Fall River, if she had left Fall River, she would have been accused of running away. And yet she stayed, and they treated her, ostracized her, basically.
It's interesting because shortly after her death, an interview was given by a very close friend who was not identified, although we suspect it was likely Helen Layton, who was a very close friend of hers. And this person said that after Lizzie was acquitted, her first instinct was to leave Fall River because she felt that she would be ostracized, and that her friends encouraged her to stay because they felt that if she left, it would appear that she were running away. It was almost an admission of guilt. This friend went on to say that Lizzie later came to regret the decision of staying, and that the friends who encouraged her also regretted encouraging her to stay. And that says something, I think. But later in her life, she did say that she stayed in Fall River because she hoped that while she lived, the murderer would be found so that she could walk down Main Street and face all the people who had been cutting her all those years.
Hmm.
So, you have to wonder. You have to give her a lot of credit for staying. I think that took a lot of guts.
Yeah, no matter what, whether guilty or innocent, the fact that she did stick around could not have been easy.
No.
And when you talk about her as being a folklore character, it's interesting that before the murders occurred, she was mainly a non-entity, but for among the people. that were in her circle. She was relatively unknown to the community, and it was only after the fact that all of the stories surfaced about things that supposedly she had done prior to the murders, that she had stolen jewelry off the corpse of a friend of hers that was dying. That she had cut the heads off cats. All of these things were, whispered from one person to the other, and the story got more gruesome as it, moved from ear to ear. And all of these things just became part of what you call the folklore heroine or character, and it got blown totally out of proportion with no substantiation whatsoever.
Well, the problem, too, is that when something like this happens, and I think probably a majority of the people who delve into this case think that she at least had a hand in what, or some knowledge of what was going on. So then that becomes the need to try to explain why. And the need for an explanation as to why these murders occurred becomes the Lizzie Borden backstory.
Right, and I know it's interesting that you say that, because the same woman who was interviewed shortly after Lizzie's death said that in the long relationship that she had with Lizzie, only once did the question of the crime ever come up for discussion. And she said that all Lizzie said was that she had some idea as to what might have happened, but that she herself knew what it was to be falsely accused, so she would never accuse anyone. Interesting.
Yeah, definitely. And it shows, too, that there probably could have been, not to question the integrity of the Fall River Police Department, but that there might have been other leads and other ways that they could have gone had they not immediately focused so much on Lizzie.
Oh, and let's face it, in 1892, Fall River, the police department, they weren't used to things like this happening. Bordens were not murdered in Fall River in such a horrific manner. So they were used to dealing with drunks and prostitutes. And when you look at the old police records, that's what you see a lot of. Yes, there were other murders. There were some pretty horrific ones, but this certainly wasn't the norm. And it wasn't expected, to have happened, in a Borden house on 2nd Street. So when the first police officers arrived, the first police officer who arrived didn't know what to make of the whole thing, and he basically deputized the first passerby and went back to the police station. So, the thing was sort of messed up right from the beginning. Yeah. There were a lot of mistakes made, no doubt. Things would be handled completely differently today. But, of course, we're talking about 1892, and forensics and such have changed considerably. So,
absolutely. Well, we have a call on the line, and if anybody wants to call in and ask a question or offer a point during the discussion, the number is 508-996-0500, 1-877-996-1420. But we do ask that because we have both Michael and Dennis on the phone, if the callers can just hang up on their own instead of us cutting them off, because if we do, we'll accidentally cut Dennis off. So. And hopefully, Dennis, you have caller ID, so that does happen.
Unfortunately, I don't, Tim, so
all right.
I'm on my own.
All right, hang on here. Let's go to the phones. Good evening. You're on Spooky Southcoast with Michael Martins and Dennis Binette. How you doing?
Greetings. Keith Johnson here. How you doing?
Hello, Keith. How are you?
Hi, Keith.
Hi, gentlemen. Doing well. Very interesting topic. Always been close to me because, as Tim knows, my grandfather lived right in the neighborhood of Lizzie Borden at the time, and certainly remembered the aftermath. And I have family buried in Oak Grove Cemetery right next to the Bordens on my mother's side. So, it's always been a story that's very, very close to my family. And I think an interesting note that you're bringing up is that she was very much a woman of her time and very much not in the public eye, and this was just totally overwhelming for her. How could she possibly be prepared for all the publicity? And it was said that she showed very little emotion during her trial, and I find that not surprising at all, because I think she was just totally overwhelmed. I mean, the two times that she showed emotion were, of course, when Andrew Borden's skull was produced, and she became very faint, and also, when she was acquitted, she broke down sobbing. But otherwise, I mean, just a totally overwhelming situation for her.
It's interesting, Keith, about the not showing any emotion, because something did come out in testimony as well. Her doctor, Dr. Bowen, that lived across the street, had been administering her a sedative as of the day of the murders. He was giving her bromocaffeine, but when that wasn't strong enough, he increased the medication to a derivative of morphine. And she was given that on a daily basis. And when he testified at the trial and was asked about the medication, and the attorney asked him when they had stopped giving her that medication, the answer was that he hadn't, that he was still giving it to her. And that was 10 months later. So that could very well have contributed to her lack of emotion in public, as well as just the character and the type of person that she was brought up to be, as women were at that period.
But certainly, if you read the letters that she wrote from prison, you'll, I think, have a very good sense of the type of person that she was, and certainly was capable of great emotion.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I'm looking forward to reading your book very much. It's interesting that on the day of the murders, the Fall River Police were at their annual outing at Rocky Point in Warwick, Rhode Island, Rocky Point Amusement Park, which is, as I'm talking, I live only my wife Sandra and I live only 3 blocks from Rocky Point, and it's like that's where they were the day of the murder. So
they were at their annual clam bake.
Yes, exactly. You could just picture the police coming back and saying to their wives, "Did I miss anything today?" And
they certainly did.
Well, they had their fill of chowder and clam cakes anyway.
Yes, right, the chowder and clam cakes.
No, tell me, what did your family say? Did they know her at all? Did they know Lizzie?
They did not know her, and my grandfather, who passed away at age 93, he never met her personally, and he was only 5 years old at the time, about 5 years old at the time of the murders, but he certainly remembered the aftermath.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, he had the story of the grocery boy who came to Maplecroft to deliver a pickle barrel, and they had nothing to open it with, and this is a local urban legend, and Lizzie said she was going to go get the axe to open it with, and she comes back. The guy's halfway down the street holding onto his hat.
Exactly. There are several versions of that story, and none of which you can actually document. But what we have been able to document are the very close relationships that she had with a number of people who did make deliveries to her house. There were a number of tradespeople that she was comfortable with. We know that, in fact, she often would select certain individuals from certain companies to either make deliveries or go up to the house. And she maintained very close relationships with many of these people, or if they weren't particularly close, they were at least very thoughtful relationships on her part. And we've been able to document several of those in Parallel Lives.
There was a man who delivered coal, and I think this is a great story. And when he would go into her cellar, she would always make sure that there was a pitcher of milk and some chocolate cake on the stairs so that he could have a little treat while he was doing his work. And then she'd put a tip inside a little pigskin wallet, and she would throw it down the stairs to him so that he would have a tip for his trouble.
And that happened consistently every delivery he made for a number of years.
That's interesting, and she certainly had her good points. I mean, she was a Sunday school teacher too, and which a lot of people don't know.
Right. Well, she was a woman who had been very religious earlier in her life, and ultimately, when she was shunned at the Central Congregational Church, she became I think a more spiritual person. Mm-hmm. But it's interesting, when you read her funeral instructions, it's very clear that she believed in an afterlife, and there was no doubt in her mind where she was going, and she was eager to get there. She wasn't a woman who feared death, and she certainly believed that she was going to meet her Maker, and was eager to do so. So that is also
that's interesting.
A point about her life that's kind of intriguing.
Yeah. I'm wondering if there are any known recordings of her voice, her speaking voice.
Several people have asked that, and we can't answer that. If they exist, we don't know about them. Certainly, we've had access to a terrific amount of material, both published and unpublished, and, we're still hearing about things in private collections, which is fascinating. But several people have asked about either film or recordings of her voice, and if they exist, we've not heard about them. And it's interesting to me because, fortunately, I started here years ago. I was just a kid and got to know several people who who knew her. And the strange thing is, it never occurred to me, for whatever reason, to ask them what she sounded like. So I never thought of asking that. So who knows, though? They may be out there somewhere.
Michael and I had the good fortune to meet with the last person that we know of that was alive during Lizzie's lifetime and knew her. She was a very close friend of, Lizzie was a very close friend of this girl's family at the time. And we did ask her about Lizzie's voice, and unfortunately, as a young girl, it was not one of the things that she committed to memory, and she really couldn't say anything. But she did have some wonderful memories about going in a car driven by her father with Lizzie out to Gray's Ice Cream in Tiverton, and just for rides out that way, and just nice memories all around.
That's truly fascinating. It's a truly fascinating topic, and I very much look forward to reading your book, gentlemen. And,
thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much.
Enjoy.
Okay, Tim, we'll be seeing you on the 21st.
Absolutely. Well, you'll be seeing me before.
Oh, yes.
In your dreams. Ha, ha, ha. No, I'll talk to you soon, Keith. Thanks.
Okay, take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
All right, we have another call here on the line. Again, if you want to call in, my apologies to the chat room. I mistyped it in the chat room. It's 1-877-996-1420 or 508-996-0500 is the other number as well. Good evening. You're on Spooky Southcoast with Dennis Binette and Michael Martins. How you doing?
Hi, Tim. It's Faye Musselman. How are
Hello,
you?
Faye. How are you? Great to hear from you.
Yeah, and it's great to hear the guys on the radio.
Hello, Faye. How are you?
Hi, Michael. Hi.
How you doing,
Yeah.
Faye?
How you doing?
I'm doing great. Listen, I called in because I just came across something recently that's not mentioned in your book. You might be aware of, in Masterpieces of Murder by Gerald Gross, he deals with the Edmund Pearson Radin controversy. But anyway, he puts forth his theory that it was Bridget helping Lizzie and that the hatchet was actually hidden in the water receptor in Bridget's room.
Yes.
Now, I don't know if you've ever seen this, but I've never researched when that was put into the house at the time it was built or subsequent to 1893 or when. But I thought it was an interesting theory, and since so many authors take information subsequent from one book to another and regurgitate it, nothing was mentioned about that theory of that water retainer or whatever the heck you call it. You know what I'm speaking of.
Right. No,
Have you ever come across any information relating to that?
No, not really. And I'm wondering, was it a cistern that collected rainwater, or was it for city water? Do you know?
No, and the way they built houses back then, what they had to do is that the water got pumped up to it. It fed water upstairs.
Right.
It's
right.
like
There's one in this building. Yes.
Yes, and
So saving the labor effort of going up and down the stairs a little bit. Is that the idea?
yes,
Right. Because in this building there is a tank up in the loft, and from a well in the basement, every day a man would come in and pump up by hand 200 gallons of well water up to the loft. 100 gallons were heated by gas, and there was a gravity-fed system. Yeah. So they had hot and cold running water in this particular house back in the 1870s. So perhaps they had a similar version in that house. Interesting. I wonder if that tank is still up there.
it is.
It is. It is.
Okay.
And it hasn't been used for decades, I'm sure.
Yep.
But, you know, the police testified about every nook and cranny was searched, and yet that specifically is not mentioned.
Interesting.
And you don't hear about it in...
But what I find even more interesting is that everybody debates whatever happened to the missing alleged murder weapon, and that never comes up.
No,
and
you know, I've always wondered...
It is in this book by Gerald Gross.
Huh. With the murder
anyway,
weapon.
I do want to say to your listeners that have not read or purchased Parallel Lives, if you're interested in the history of Fall River or the Lizzie case in general, it's a must-have. For me, and I've said this to you guys personally, it put the cherry on top of the cake. I mean, once I read that book cover to cover, and I've read it like 4 times cover to cover now.
Wow.
It's done it for me. I'm like done. I've always wanted to know Lizzie as a 3-dimensional being. Who was this woman? I want to feel like I can touch her, know her. And the book did that. The book did that for me, and put a lot of questions I had in my mind to rest because it was packaged in the context of her society. and it made so much sense to me. That's why. Oh, yeah, I can see that now, kind of thing. I think you guys did a magnificent job. And
well, thank you for that.
Thanks so much.
That effort will not be repeated in my lifetime or if ever. But I encourage everybody to get the book.
Absolutely. And you can get it from the Fall River Historical Society's website, LizzieBorden.org, or from the website, LizzieBordenParallelLives.com. We're coming up on the news break here, so we're sorry to have to say goodbye to you, Faye, but hopefully you can talk to us again real soon.
Thank you.
Take care, Faye. Thanks for calling.
Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot, Faye.
Bye-bye. That, of course, is Faye Musselman, who we've had on the show a few times in the past, and just a great woman. And we were glad we could get her in there on a ghost hunt, which was pretty interesting. Next, we got to get Michael and Dennis in there for one.
Sure.
All right, we are coming up on the news, though, guys. When we come back in the second hour, I do want to talk more about the Borden family and the extended family, the immediate family, and kind of like a little bit of a Lizzie Borden fact or fiction to some degree about some of the stories that we've heard over the years.
Right, that'll be fun.
Sounds good.
All right. So that'll be coming up in just a few minutes after the news. It is going to be a brief break of just a few minutes. When we come back, too, we'll also take your calls at 508-996-0500, 1-877-996-1420. And you can also email us, spookycrew@spookysouthcoast.com. You can also jump in the chat room on Spooky TV at SpookySouthCoast.com, where you can see our in-studio cameras and you can interact with some of the other listeners of the show. Always a great conversation going on in there, sometimes related to the topic, sometimes not. Sometimes there's things in there that we can't get to and questions that we can't ask, so we encourage the chat room participants to call in as well. Again, 508-996-0500, 1-877-996-1420. We'll be right back with more here on Spooky South Coast.
First with local news, talk, and sports. This is WBSM New Bedford, AM 1420. WBSM, a Cumulus station.
From ABC News, I'm Chuck Severson. Still a mystery. Who are the new multi-mega millionaires? Lottery officials say at least 3 tickets for last night's record jackpot had numbers matching all those drawn, but there are more than 100 other winners. ABC's Jamie Roth in New York.
At Fuji Restaurant on Queens Boulevard, workers reported for their evening shifts. 12 of them had huge smiles on their faces.
Like, oh my God. Yeah, very happy.
The 12 workers here at Fuji chipped in for Mega Millions tickets and wound up second prize winners.
We'll get the total like 250,000, but we share for 12 people.
The 12 bought their tickets directly next door to the restaurant at a convenience store.
Saying they will keep up the pressure. Thousands who marched and rallied through Sanford, Florida, where an unarmed 17-year-old was gunned down last month.
This rally took a more pointed tone. Reverend Jesse Jackson calling for boycotts if admitted shooter George Zimmerman isn't arrested.
We'll use every weapon in the nonviolent hostile.
Reverend Al Sharpton referencing a video of Zimmerman showing no visible signs of struggle.
You're going to walk him back into a police car, and you're going to handcuff him again. But this time you're going to print him, you're going to book him, you're going to photo him, and you're going to bring him before a jury of his peers.
Patrick Johnson, ABC News, Sanford, Florida.
Attacks on the Syrian people continue, says Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, despite President Assad's acceptance of a UN plan to end the crisis.
My fellow ministers and I agreed on the need for the killing to stop immediately and urged the joint special envoy to set a timeline for next steps.
Clinton spoke in Saudi Arabia before she left for a 60-nation Friends of the Syrian People meeting in Turkey tomorrow. Big winner-take-all delegates primaries coming Tuesday in Wisconsin, and 3 of the 4 Republican presidential contenders have been campaigning. You're listening to ABC News.
At Advance Auto Parts, we don't do anything just part way. We go full throttle. We won't just sell you a few cans of oil and toot our little horn. Oh, no. We'll make deals that will make your wallet roar like an 8,000 horsepower nitro-burning funny car. Oh, you heard me. Right now at Advance Auto Parts, get a 5+ quarts jug of Castrol GTX conventional motor oil and a DriveWorks filter for just $19.99. Plus, you'll get a John Force racing hat valued at $20, yours free with purchase instantly. You know John Force, the guy who blazes the drag strip at over 300 miles per hour. You probably can't get your car to go that fast, legally, but you can wear the exact same hat. So step on it to Advance Auto Parts and get a $19.99 Castrol oil change special and a free John Force racing hat on the spot. One more way. Service is our best part. See store for details.
A luxury cruise liner is steaming under its own power after drifting for 24 hours south of the Philippines.
The Azamara Quest and 800 passengers and crew, including 200 Americans, was crippled by fire in its engine room Friday night. Engineers made repairs and the vessel is limping toward Malaysia. Algier Ricafrente with the Philippine Coast Guard.
The vessel is now moving at slow speed since they have already restored the power of the vessel and its propulsion. So the intention of the vessel is to proceed to her next port of call in Sandakan, Malaysia.
Expected to arrive within the next 48 hours. 5 crew members were injured in the fire. Richard Cantu, ABC News.
Terrorists are busy. These emergency crews responded to coordinated car bombings in southern Thailand. 14 people were killed and another 340 were injured. Muslim insurgents are suspected. An attack at an army base by al-Qaeda-linked militants in southern Yemen. 30 people on both sides are dead. Airstrikes forced the militants to scram. Suspended the license of a Southern California doctor accused of giving his daughter hundreds of at-home doses of the powerful anesthetic that killed Michael Jackson. The California Medical Board says Dr. Robert Markman, a retired anesthesiologist, administered the drug propofol about 500 times in 5 years to his daughter in a filthy home for an unspecified genital pain. This is ABC News.
Trying to sell your old car? Instead, donate your vehicle to Heritage for the Blind. Pickup is free and your donation is tax deductible. Just call 1-800-895-8035. Heritage for the Blind accepts cars, vans, trucks, and boats, whether they run or not. Donate your vehicle and you'll receive a free 3-day vacation voucher to over 50 locations. Call 1-800-895-8035. That's 1-800-895-8035.
Chuck Severson, ABC News.
This is Jack Peterson with the latest featured animals up for adoption at the Forever Paws Animal Shelter at 300 Linwood Street in Fall River. Chopper and Queenie are 2 great felines that are up for adoption. Chopper's a handsome, declawed, black and white 9-year-old male who is super sweet. He's quiet, has a laid-back personality, and gets along well with other animals. Queenie's an 8-year-old brown tiger female who's a total sweetheart. She's lovable, enjoys being held, and gets along with other animals. Chopper and Queenie both visit area nursing homes and bring smiles and joy to all they socialize with through the pet therapy program. A reminder, if you're 55 or older, you're eligible to adopt either Chopper or Queenie through the Senior for Senior Adoption Program, sponsored by the Coalition for Animals of Greater New Bedford. The regular adoption fee is $100, reduced to just $5. For more information on Chopper and Queenie, log on to the website foreverpaws.com or call 508-677-9154.
Welcome to spooky Southcoast.
Look, I know the supernatural is something that isn't supposed to happen, but it does happen.
AM 1420, WBSM presents Spooky South Coast with your hosts Tim Weisberg and Matt Costa.
All right, welcome back. Hour number 2 of Spooky South Coast. Tim Weisberg here, along with science advisor Matt Moniz, the silent assassin. Matt Costa is out and about, traveling the world, seeing the world, experiencing the world. And we wish him luck if he's listening. Have fun on your journey. He's definitely been seeing some landmarks out there.
Yeah, he has, hasn't he?
And, I wish I had known all the places he was going, because there's probably Spooky South Coast listeners we could have hooked him up with out there who could have given him kind of an inside tour of some of these places. So I'm just waiting for him to write back and be like, oh, I got a chance to go on the Queen Mary. I missed it when I was out there. So, but of course, we're having fun back here. And were you impressed, Moniz? I actually was able to segue into the news and come back from the show without messing up too bad. So, but we still have a whole hour's worth of show that I could screw up royally. So, plenty of time. But let's get back into the discussion about Lizzie Borden with our guests, Michael Martins and Dennis Binette. Sorry, Moniz, you're going to say?
Oh, we got people want to make sure that if he is going out to haunted places, make sure he's not doing any bloodletting.
Well, I don't think he can help it. Yeah. I think that's just part of his own religious beliefs. We can't stop him. But we are talking about Lizzie Borden with our guests, Michael Martins and Dennis A. Binette. They are the curators of the Fall River Historical Society, and they're the authors of the book Parallel Lives, A Social History of Lizzie A. Borden and Her Fall River. And the phone's ringing again, guys, so let's take this call. Good evening. You're on Spooky South Coast with Michael Martins and Dennis Binette. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
We are spooktacular, as we say here.
Good. I was calling to see if I could get on. I have an uncle who said he killed the Bordens. A great uncle.
Really?
Yeah.
Guys, I'll let you take this.
Now tell me, when was your uncle born? Great uncle.
First off, as they say in sports radio, first time, long time.
Well,
and
thank you for
that.
that.
Go Bruins.
Thank you.
What was the question? I apologize.
No. Your uncle your great uncle lived in Fall River?
He lived in Providence.
In Providence. And,
yeah,
and
he
when
was
was
born
he born?
According to my dad, he was born in 1870.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe the murder took place in like the 1890s or something.
1892, so he would have been about 22 at the time?
Okay. No, I'm older. I'm 62 myself in a couple of months. So I remember this guy. You know, my uncle, he actually lived to 98. He died in the late 60s, 1968. So for the first, the formative years of my life, I remember this guy, and he was, by this time he was in kind of in bad shape. Okay, so everything I say here we can take with a grain of salt.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, we really believe this guy, and we really think that he was either involved in the murders or was, he just had so much hate in him. We think he really could have been capable of this.
Now, what was his connection to the family, the Borden family?
Well, now again, this is all according to my father. He was dating a woman who worked at the inn.
And
Bianca Sullivan or something.
What inn is this?
Well, this is the the hotel there or whatever.
A hotel in Fall River, or
well, the house. He's in the house.
Oh, I see. Okay, worked at the Borden residence.
Yeah, I think it's a hotel now. Am I?
It's
right?
a B&B
I live
now.
in
Yes.
Connecticut.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Okay. So yeah, he dated a Sullivan woman. And
the family's domestic was a woman by the name of Bridget Sullivan.
Okay, well there you go. And rumors are that there was a Sullivan who fathered one of my who mothered one of my father's cousins. So we've always said maybe that somehow there's actually still blood in the family from this, from the time of the murders, which is pretty extraordinary if you think about it.
What did the family say about his reason for taking out the two Bordens?
Well, now, by the time I knew this guy, right, this is again in like the 60s, he had his gallbladder out. He was a paraplegic. He was a diabetic, so he'd gone blind. He'd lost a foot. He suffered from neuralgia, neuritis. So again, we take it with a grain of salt. He was sort of rickety at this point. But apparently this guy, he was such whenever he would stay at somebody's house, right, apparently he stayed at the Borden residence. He was dating the maid, whatever. I shouldn't say stay. He would go pick her up there, I guess, at the, I guess she got off at 5 o'clock or something. I don't know. I'm taking guesses here. But he was dating this woman, and he would often pick her up at the residence to take her out, to squire her about town in Fall River. Now, from what I remember from this guy, we once took a trip with him to Busch Gardens back in the 60s. We took an RV from